Okay, welcome everybody. We still have a few people joining us, but in the interest of getting started on time, let's get started on time. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today to our faculty seminar by Dr. Karen Bax. Dr. Bax is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Education at Western and a clinical psychologist. She engages in training future scholars and practitioners through teaching and as the practicum supervisor for students in the PhD in School and Applied Child Psychology program. Dr. Bax is also the director of Western's Mary J. Wright Research and Education Center at Marymount, a unique university community collaboration that emphasizes early childhood development research in real-world settings and knowledge sharing across systems. Dr. Bax is involved in applied research related to social emotional learning and self-regulation of children who have experienced adversity. Today she'll be telling us about making mindfulness matter, creating a culture of resiliency within the family. Thank you, Dr. Bax, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Jen, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be speaking to you today about an area of research that I've been working on in the last almost 5 years, called Making Mindfulness Matter. With that, I will begin telling you a bit about the journey. I have to remember I'm not used to collaborate. So in the next hour, what I'm looking forward to doing is talking to you a bit about the background of this research, what got me into being excited about social emotional learning, mindful awareness, and working with families. Talk to you just a bit about how this M3 research really was a springboard for the Mary J. Wright Center and bringing research and practice into the real world setting. Speak to you a bit about designing the program, evaluating the program, and next steps for this research. I have many people to thank, and I'll thank some now and some at the end of my talk, but I really wanted to put a shout out to the amazing Mary J. Wright Lab, Melissa Reed, who's in the PhD program, one of my graduate students, Amelia, who has graduated from the counseling program and worked with me for a number of years, Alyssa Mueller, who is finishing up her master's this year and moving into the doctoral program in School and Applied, Christina Amico in the PhD program here, Amal Bayobaid, who is a first-year master's in School and Child Psychology student. Sarah Wells, who is actually, she's seconded from Marymount as a study coordinator, and Isabella Steck, who 1 day a week works on research-related things for M3. Okay, so my past clinical work really led to my current research agenda, I think, as I kind of contemplate it. I worked for nearly 15 years with children and families in the justice system, and I completed court-ordered assessments for youth and court-ordered parenting capacity assessments. I also worked as the lead of a multidisciplinary clinical supports team that brought mental health services to youth in the justice system and to many youth in group homes throughout our region. Undoubtedly, the majority of those youth and their families that I saw faced an incredible disproportionate amount of adversity and trauma. And part of my work on the mental health team was bringing trauma-informed approach to youth justice. So although marginalized youth and their families will always have a very special place in my heart, I knew that I didn't want to work in forensic psychology my entire career. So working in that field is, it's really challenging, it's really rewarding, but I knew that I didn't want to do it entirely. But what I remember thinking when working in there, you know, what type of prevention or early intervention would have been helpful for these youth and these families? In my mind, I kept coming back to thinking about what are the avoidable adversities, or how can we mitigate some of those adversities for children? And one of the things about research on child well-being that we know strongly and across many different circumstances for children is that a positive protective adult in their life, not always their parent or guardian, but often, is a very strong protective factor. So this program was created with the idea of bringing resiliency to parents of children and to the entire family. The creation of the program, I based it on this theory of change model around child well-being. And there's direct and indirect pathways to child well-being and family well-being. The direct model would be, the direct model looks at direct links between kind of what's going on here with parents and child well-being. So for example, maternal depression is an example of that. It's often been linked in the literature to troubles with attachment and poor social-emotional functioning, even when it's been controlled by mediating effects such as parenting quality and discipline. So we see that can have that direct effect on children. There's also indirect effects as well, and we know that some parenting practices have that indirect effect of negatively or positively affecting child well-being. And there's other moderating circumstances as well. So in creating M3 and keeping this model in mind, it was really important to me that it was a concurrent parent and child program. So hopefully affecting family well-being and parent well-being. And that the parenting piece, the parent piece of the program was about improving parenting for children and touching on some of these developmental or these parent-child interaction variables, and the child part also affecting hopefully some of these variables for children that we know brings positive well-being. This is just a snapshot over time of the M3 program and kind of how it's evolved. So before I go into the actual design of the program originally, when I came to the university in 2016, Claire Crooks and I were talking a lot about social-emotional learning in schools and mindful awareness, and there was a call from public health around a particular research grant, and and Claire was really interested in looking at a program lined up through the schools through a partnership with the Catholic School Board, and I was really looking to look at a program for within the community through Mary J. Wright. I couldn't find any such program that included both parents and children, and touched on some of the evidence that we know is important in child and family well-being, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So part of that grant from the public health in the community arm was also to create the M3 program. So it was created, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute, with Marymount as the partner. We did a pilot group as we were creating the program, and then ran 3 more groups that year, continued to the next year where we had 5 groups. We did a review of the data, kind of a process evaluation, you would call it, at the end of this year to determine if we needed to make changes to varying aspects of the program, including measures, how it was set up, etc. And then we moved on to continue to run the group, and then of course COVID hit, and we only got 1 group in last year, but that totaled 13 groups minus the pilot group, and that I'll be reporting on today for you. We were fortunate enough to get some extra funding to move the whole program online. And that's what we worked very hard on last summer in the lab. And so we're looking at 1 year of just seeing the feasibility of that program online. In 2018, 2019, because self-regulation in children and mindful awareness, social emotional learning are often connected in the literature. I received a grant from Western, MHSRB grant to look for 1 year at not only including a subjective measure of executive functioning from parents, but we also actually administered some executive functioning subtests of the NEPSI to the children in that group. In 2019-2020, I came upon, indirectly actually, from somebody who was looking to do a mindful awareness program with children with epilepsy. And so we met and explained the program, and we applied for a CIHR grant for that. And that became M3E for M3 epilepsy. And the partner, the co-PI is Kathy Speechley, and our community partner is Epilepsy Southwestern Ontario. So they're the ones actually delivering the group in the community to children and families who experience epilepsy, and that's going on for 3 years. We also received a grant from Western Education. Thank you, Western Education. In regards to piloting the M3 program for Arabic-speaking newcomer families. Someone from MRC had been in touch with me around that, and so we begin in April piloting a couple of groups this year just to see how that goes, and the material's been translated into Arabic for that purpose. And then finally, last but not least, bringing social emotional learning and mindful awareness in a program is one thing. In the schools where they deliver those concepts to children, it's more embedded in the everyday. And so looking to see how to embed that into a program such as the Learning Disabilities Association here in London was an interest of theirs. And so we came together to begin in June to look at embedding it into an association that works with children and families. So that's sort of the trajectory of all of that. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the review of some of the data here and the evaluation with all final 13 groups. Okay, so designing, creating the program. This traditionally research in the community is primarily progressed in one direction, though I think we're doing better as we go on. But you know, we often tend to get selective input from community stakeholders and then obtain that information, write it up for our colleagues or share it with them, and often it doesn't go back to the community. And often we go into the community to look at or implement interventions, but without a sustainability plan for that. And I certainly know from my work in the community prior to coming to the university that there's definitely a known gap between evidence-based practices and community-based services. Not at a fault of the community at all, and we could talk about that for a little while, but unfortunately that link doesn't always pan out in the everyday life of helping children and families. So I saw the creation evaluation of the M3 program in a collaboration with Marymount, sort of as a microcosm of the model that we hope to achieve through our partnership between Mary J. Wright and between Marymount. So the formation of the project started right from the very beginning. There was a group from Marymount along with myself and some students in my lab who began talking right at the time of the grant to better coordinate what needs there would be, what we could ask for in the grant to better support Marymount's sustainability of taking this and helping in creating of it. During the execution of activities, we met very regularly to create this program, a subgroup of Marymount, as I mentioned, And, I really saw them as the experts of many of the questions of how and what types of programs work for people who and families who struggle. And they had a wealth of wisdom around, number of sessions. They assisted in the content and the language, the plain language needed. They indicated that their families generally don't want gift cards from chapters because it's not practical for them. They're looking for gift cards for grocery stores or things like that. They also were helpful in naming the program. So M3 was really it really came together from asking parents in our pilot group, children in our pilot group, and then the subgroup at Marymount. And so collectively, that's what we came up with. And then as part of our discussions at the formation of the program with Marymount was if this was something that was feasible, was liked, etc. Could we build that sustainability for them so when the grant is over, they would be able to continue that? And that's where we've gone. So the program is 8 weeks long. It includes one 90-minute session per week. It's a concurrent group, so parents go in their group, children go in their group at the same time, but then they come together at the end and they practice some of the M3 skills together, which is really lovely to see. And the M3 program was really stresses support of the use of the skills at home in different ways, which I will show you. In considering mental health promotion, disease prevention, we're trying to influence people's attitudes, their choices, their beliefs, their behaviors. And so I wanted to base the model on really tangible ways in which we could introduce an intervention and focus on some of those changeable behaviors and objectives based in empirical evidence. So coming from a strong scientific practitioner model, it was important to me to create a program that began as being as evidence informed as it could be. And so some of the things that informed the program and how it was set up and the types of interventions within it are, that we know a single most common factor for children in their lives to develop resilience is a supportive adult. We know that parents who report higher parenting stress report themselves to have poor psychological well-being, which has implications for child well-being. We know that families with greater parenting stress, there's a reported link between many challenges and difficulties that children might exhibit. And then on the side of some of the skills and some of the ways in which we, some of the things that we included in the program, mindful awareness, certainly growing area of interest and study over the last 30 years. You can just look at Shoppers Drug Mart in their magazine aisle, and there's so many magazines now just about mindfulness. But we know that there seems to be some definite benefits for mindfulness or mindful awareness. For adults, that's been studied far more in that population. For children, it's been studied more within school programs, but certainly there are indicators of ways in which it can be helpful for children. Social emotional skills, there's been a lot of research around children with poor social emotional skills versus children with more advanced social emotional skills. And certainly what's been found is that good social emotional skills in children, even early on, predict. Do you
everybody. Karen's reconnecting. I think her internet may have gotten a little bit unstable. Hopefully she'll be able to join us again momentarily. Thank you for your patience in the meantime. Hi, Karen, you're back.
I'm back. I don't know what happened there.
I think your internet maybe had a blip.
Maybe I'm like directly linked into the internet, so I usually don't have those problems anymore. But
yeah, I don't know. Anyways,
who knows?
I think well, let me. Oh, where are you down here, Karen? Okay, I am making you a presenter, and you should be able to share your screen again.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, we're back on track. And also in the literature, there's a relation between positive psychology and links to child development. You may have seen and heard different experiments and things like that around gratitude and positivity and its effect on pro-social behavior and overall well-being, particularly in adults, but also related to children. So based on all of that, the Making Mindfulness Matter program has a number of session topics each week. They are the same for both children and parents. Parents learn them in relation to how to use them for their parenting, particularly when their children show strong emotions, and children learn them in relation to themselves. I'm going to show you just this. I'm not going to show you all of this video, but this is a video about M3 that parents see at the introduction. This collaboration, it will work.
Making mindfulness matter for mindfulness-based program for parents and children.
All right, I'll stop it there. Just for the interest in time, but that was just to give you a bit of an introduction to M3 and what the parents see. In addition to the program, we have created a 2-day training for the program. It's manualized, and we have trained many people, many of our students as well, but over 40 of the staff at Marymount have been trained, which is really great and really incredible. Many of the MRC staff have now been trained, and all of the Epilepsy Southwestern Ontario staff have been trained. In that we have a full program manual, so they're written exactly what to say, what the concepts mean, etc., how to describe them, what the activities are. There's a parent program manual, there's a child program manual for children 4 to 6, and then there's a second child program manual for children 7 to 10. And they all teach the same concepts each week, but for the child program, some of the activities are a bit more mature for the older group than the younger group. Because we really felt that and wanted to support the use of the skills that families are learning at home, we created a number of family resources. One of them is a parent journal each week, where parents are asked just a simple question to think about in relation to the key concept that they learned that week, and then parents discuss it the next week. A large section of the parent program is bringing it back to parenting. So of what you learned, how can you embed that using that STOP model into your everyday parenting? We also created family resource cards. So this is the front of it, and this is the back of it, of the key concepts each week as a reminder for parents and children about some of those things. When we did our first process evaluation after about midway through, one of the consistent feedbacks from parenting was they were looking for more they wanted to learn a little bit more exactly what was happening in their the child group, but they really wanted to learn language to use based on what they were learning. So we put together a Bring It Back to Parenting sheet each week that talks about what the child, what book they might have read, etc., and then a piece of mindful talk at home. And this is for when they were learning about the brain. So talks a little bit about how to explain it and then how to use it. So, Alex, I like the choice you made. I can see your wise owl brain was working hard. And so we've gotten great feedback from parents that they really like it and really appreciate that language use there and found it really practical. So evaluating the program. There's been a lot of enthusiasm around mindfulness and meditation as intervention, and certainly some people would say the enthusiasm for it has moved beyond that evidence base because its face validity of it is very, very high for people. So in creating this program, evaluating its feasibility to begin with, and then eventually through randomized control trials, etc., was important to me. So just a little bit about that middle process evaluation that we completed. So we created the program and how to evaluate it. We implemented, I think it was 7 groups that were in that. And then we reviewed the data of what we had to see, is this feasible? Is it acceptable? Is there demand for it? Is the implementation of it working? Do the measures seem sensitive enough to see change over 8 weeks? Those types of things. We also looked at the program from both the facilitator point of view and parent and child point of view, because they contributed each week to their thoughts on the program. And we made changes and then continued delivering the program until last March, when COVID came. So when excuse me, considering looking at the feasibility of the program, we looked at child, parent, and qualitative data. This is just a few examples, but looking at, did they practice the skills since last week? What was their favorite or least favorite activity? What ideas or activities did they find helpful? What do they understand or not understand? At home, we asked specifically parents, how often did you practice the M3 skill? How often did your child? How often did you practice it together? What situation led up to using that skill? Did you find it helpful? Some participant characteristics. We looked at attendance and demand, so wait list. What did the Marymount wait list show about that group? We looked at whether child gender, executive functioning of the child, or the kind of level of the stress impacted home use skills. So was it the case that sometimes parents were so stressed, those in the higher stress category had trouble practicing at home, for example? And then we looked at some preliminary quantitative data, just pre-post data, looking at parenting stress, executive functioning, behavioral measure, along with an adaptive subscale, and we looked at knowledge pre-post around mindfulness and the 8 topics in the program. So as I mentioned, the process evaluation that I'm just going to share with you a little bit of that right now was a sample size of 40 families. Mainly, our children were, mean age was 6.5, and there were more boys than girls. Overall, more moms attended. The median session attendance was 7, and adverse family experiences was 1.4. Now, the grant through public health was really a call around helping adults, parents, families around family violence and abuse. Originally, we had hoped to more specifically find families from Marymount who may have been or had experienced those issues and have them attend the group. That became a real challenge for a number of reasons, stigma included. So we were hoping we might be able to tease that apart by looking at adverse family experiences of each of the families, because one of them is around family violence. However, you know, in looking at the overall data, I don't think it captured quite the adversity families were experiencing, but that's something we'll learn from and see what other measures might be helpful, and also how we go about asking those questions, perhaps. So again, we were looking at acceptability, demand, implementation. At that time, mean number of sessions attended was 7. We were really happy about that. 7 out of 8 people wanted to come, it seemed. We also looked at how often or how many times families indicated they practice skills. And as you can see, majority said they practice 1 to 3 times or 4 to 6 times, and some even in the 7 to 10 range. And we asked why they chose to practice. You know, when they were at home, what kind of moved them to practice some of those skills. And they were on frustration, anger, and we were really happy to say they practice for practice sake, because we part of what we we're teaching was that you need to repeat a skill over and over again for it to be effective, and so that was really great to see. This is results that we found, again, at that point, but they suggest over time the M3 practice, M3 program and the M3 parents reported increased levels of practice. An examination of the logistic regression odds ratios showed that for each week in the program, parents were twice as likely to report practicing M3 skills with their children. So they practiced more as time went on in the program. We also wanted to look at a multi-level modeling approach used to analyze child gender, child executive functioning, and parenting stress. And what we found that regardless of child gender, it was not a significant predictor of how much practice went on at home, nor did the child executive functioning. So it wasn't that those children who were, less self-regulated practiced less, and level of parenting stress didn't seem to be associated with amount of practice. Some of the conclusions we took at that time were the program seemed acceptable. Average and attendance was high. Over time, there seemed to be a buy-in in the program, resulting in increased practice, use of skills. Program seemed feasible, even the practicing at home, and I like that it showed universality. You can have little stress or high stress, but it still seemed to be able to be useful for the families, or your child could have really high self-regulation issues or low. And then I'm not sharing this information today, but the qualitative information, which a couple of my students have written up, really did reveal that the program was acceptable to facilitators, the parents, and the children. And some of the quotes from the parents, but especially the children, are really endearing. Then looking at the efficacy of the M3 program at the end point. So this is what we worked on after last March. So our total sample size for this project was 89 families. Mean age didn't change much from previously, nor did the gender, far more boys. Majority moms attended, some dads, and we did have some moms and dads attend. Median session attended was 7, and adverse family experiences remained low. We didn't change that measure at the time, and maybe we should have, but we know now for next time. So I'm just going to share with you some of the pre-post outcomes around the program using the full sample that you saw. And this is around the mindfulness self-assessment. So this is a measure that we created to really see, does the participant know more about the content of the intervention following the group compared to before starting the group. They answered never, sometimes, often, regularly to questions, parents such as, I practice mindfulness, I'm confident in my ability to calm my child when she or he's upset, I am able to manage my own emotions when supporting my child's needs. And children answered yes, no, or I don't know to questions such as, I know how my brain works when I'm angry or upset, I use breathing breaks to calm my big feelings. And what you can see that here is that results from the linear mixed model are presented on this slide, and then in the coming slides for the other measures. And there was a significant difference for parents at the 0.01 level, for children at the 0.05 level, in their knowledge increase from pre to post, and this has been adjusted for child age, sex, parents, sex, attendance, and adverse experiences. So parents and children seem to know more after the program than before, which is the direction we'd hoped to find. In the brief too, we also found significant results from pre to post for all of the subscales, including the global executive composite. And what was interesting to me was that the cutoff for heading towards at risk was a T-score of 60, and clinically significant was 70. And at baseline, we were capturing the kind of kids who needed this program, I think. They were either at risk in many of the executive functioning categories, and, you know, at one point, they, for emotional control, the mean was at high risk. And interestingly, that is the subscale that saw the biggest change, 5.4 point difference, 5.4 points difference from pre to post. Again, this is looking at the BASC in the same way. Lower scores indicate better outcomes for the BASC, apart from the adaptive skills composite, which is here. So the overall behavioral symptom composite had a significant difference pre and post, as did the externalizing and internalizing. So all of the composites there. The mean T-score improvement after the intervention ranged from 2.2 points for the internalizing problems to 4.5 points for the externalizing problems. And then adaptive skills, also in the right direction, improved by 2.7 points. So again, we're finding what we hope to find in a preliminary pre-post evaluation, which was really exciting. The other measure that we looked at was parenting stress index, knowing that parenting stress can have a huge impact on parents and then also on their parenting and their children. This is just the model of the parenting stress index. It's a very strong measure. And again, we found significance on well, actually, we found significance on 3 of the subscales, or no, 2 of the subscales, 1 on the total composite stress scale, from pre to post. And for the parental distress scale, that was the scale where we didn't find anything significant. We have some reasons why that might be, but regardless, we were happy to see that, again, these changes from pre to post went in the direction we had hoped and hypothesized. This is just a supplementary table. It's adjusted linear mixed models showing beta coefficients, 95% confidence intervals for each covariate and each outcome. So we're looking at various variables, controlling for time and for controlling for other variables in the model, like child age, child sex, parent sex attendance, and adverse experiences. As you can see, the adjusted models showed that girls reported lower scores of mindfulness self-assessment and had fewer externalizing problems at both pre and post, which was not surprising, given we know about gender and externalizing, internalizing problems. The models also show that younger children reported greater problems on the brief shift scale and the BASC behavioral symptom composite scale. As not only a researcher but a clinician, I'm always interested in, you know, you can have statistical significance, but what about clinical significance? You know, is there actual meaningful improvement here for people? And there's various ways that you can determine this. And again, this is a pre-post, so we have to take it for what it is. But we did look at the level using descriptive statistics, and this is presenting the proportion of participants who demonstrated a clinically meaningful change after the intervention, defined as a change from pre to post of at least half a standard deviation. We chose half a standard deviation here, although we did run it with a full standard deviation. But given this is a pre-post study with a short follow-up, we thought using 5 points would give a better sense of the proportion of kids that should show a change over time. So as you can see, the results are above, but just across the different domains of executive functioning, 57 to 76 children presented with elevated scores at baseline, and 33 to 51% demonstrated a clinically significant meaningful change based on our 0.5 the deviation. In contrast to 7 to 13% who demonstrated decline after. Checking the time. With regard to the behavior and emotions of the, looking at the BASC, 35 to 71 presented with elevated scores at baseline across the various composite scales, and 22 to 42% demonstrated a clinically meaningful improvement, in contrast to 9 to 14% who demonstrated decline. Lastly, with respect to parenting stress, 31 to 50% demonstrated elevated scores at baseline, with 29 to 40% demonstrating a clinically significant meaningful change, in contrast to 10 to 19% who demonstrated a decline. So some other conclusions based on this, we felt that the measures were able to detect change over that short period of time. Overall, there seems to be high feasibility of the program in general. Certainly, we're looking to have more rigorous outcomes to move the program towards evidence-based. But having the feasibility information and data is a good start. And we really want to look at better measuring adverse events and things that children go through and to be evaluated, because our original hope was to use this program for children and families who were experiencing a lot of adversity. Just a quick note on where we're heading now. So this is M3E, creating a culture of resiliency with children and families, with children with epilepsy and their families. I was super excited to meet up with Kathy Speechley and to work on this project with her. Today is the anniversary of, I'm just going to tell you this because it's today. Today's the anniversary of my sister's death. She died from sudden death in epilepsy 10 years ago. So it's also very meaningful research to me. I'm excited to be able to do it. So it's a parallel individually randomized control trial. We're doing the intervention versus a waitlist control. And it is in connection with Epilepsy Southwestern Ontario. And really what the premise of the research shows is that quality of life in children with epilepsy and their families, it's better predicted by better family life and better mental health for children and families than actual type of seizure or number of seizures a child experiences. So we're holding out hopes that this will be a helpful program for those families. This is just a schematic of our project. And so far, again, we had we did one online group, one in-person group last year. That was the start of delivering the program with ESWO. And then COVID hit, and we moved it to a program that's completely delivered online. And we have so far delivered 3 groups. Yeah, 3 groups have been through so far. And so now the whole program, the RCT, will be an RCT of the online version of the program. And then lastly, the M3A pilot is a student project with one of my students, Amal, who speaks Arabic, so that's she's going to be a helpful facilitator, and it'll also be facilitated by the Muslim Resource Center. And the Muslim Resource Center, we're looking for a menu of programs, kind of a stepwise in building resiliency for children and parents and families. And they've been delivering the evidence-based Strengthening Families program, and we're looking for a program more directly related to parenting and child well-being. And so that led to the collaboration and the piloting of this the program here in Arabic with Arabic newcomer families for the next couple of years. I can't end without thanking my lab, as I did earlier, Claire Crooks, who has been a great mentor in getting me back into the research field, and has lots of enthusiasm for many of the similar mental health issues that families face. Kathy Speechley, who is my co-PI on the SHRC grant for M3E. Claudia, who's also on that grant, and who's been really amazing in teaching us all about REDCap, which is a data capture management program similar to Qualtrics. To Marymount Children's Center, Epilepsy Southwestern Ontario, and the Muslim Resource Center for their collaboration in making this a true community project, an area of study. So that's all for me. I'm happy to take any questions or comments if anybody has any.
Thank you very much, Karen. To ask questions, you can either use the chat window or you can unmute yourself. Anybody? Okay, well, feel free to jump in with a question, but I'll just say formally again, thank you very much, Karen. That was a great talk. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Our next faculty seminar will be Wednesday, March 24th, where Dr. Colin King from the Child and Youth Clinic will tell us about advances in supporting children and youth with anxiety, the role of parents in schools. Anybody have any final questions or comments?
Thank you very much, Jen. And if anyone does have any questions or comments, you're also most welcome to email me, kbax@uwo.ca.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you at our next faculty seminar.